Hi, everyone. A very good evening.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, we have a very special person with us, Nicole. But before we get there, I'd love to just get to see all of your faces if you want to turn on your video camera. You know. Hey, I see someone already did. Hi, Rajesh, CE. All of you, I mean, you don't have to unmute yourself, but do let us know in chat, like where you're from, what you're doing right now, what got you to this webinar. So let me type. Hi, I'm in SF at the moment. What about you, Nicole? Where are you?
I'm in New York at the moment. Beautiful, beautiful, not so bright New York.
I actually think your background looks amazing though. Like, where are you? Why is it all bricks there?
Oh, we work in the Tiffany building, which is really cool. And we actually work on the floor that Tiffany, the jewelry brand, was founded, right?
Okay.
So it felt like gave us really good energy. So the reason why we have this exposed brick is because it's an older building, pretty frankly, right? But yeah, no, it's bright because we have a wonderful ring light. I have a great team to do this setup for me. But yeah, that's why we have the brick.
Amazing. We also have Nikin here. Hey, Nikin. Hi.
Hi everyone. Thanks for making the time. Hey Nicole.
Hi.
Awesome. Guys, we'll wait for a few more minutes because Indian Standard Time, people tend to join a few minutes late. But would love to ask all of you. This is not going to be a super fun webinar because the topic is quite depressing, like increase in RFE denial rates across all these categories. But on a more fun note, would love to know what, where are you guys at in terms of your immigration journey? Have you already filed a case and got an RFE or denial, and now you're here because you want to understand, or you're about to file? Or you're literally just starting out and you just want to be educated on these topics. So about to file. So Awais says he is about to file. So Awais, if you don't mind also sharing in the chat, what visa type are you about to file for? Is it an EB-1A, O-1A, NIW? Oh, okay, O-1A. Lovely. And what about the rest of you? I see so many names like Rajesh, Murugan, Tulasi, Mariam, all of you. Let us know in the chat box. Are you about to file? Already filed? Or just starting out?
Yeah, even if you're going in a certain direction, like tell me what you're interested in. Ah.
Okay, so Murugan's in the process of EB1 profile building. I suspect quite a few people would be in that process here. Gonna file in the future. Awesome. Um, can you guys also mention in the chat, and everyone who just joined, welcome. Let us know in chat what visa type you're most interested in. I saw two O1s and one EB1 so far. I'd like to know the rest of you because we can then focus on the majority first and then go to the second and third. Received an RFE on EB1 last year and withdrew my case. Yeah, I hear you. Seen a lot of people who did that, honestly. I'm seeing more EB1s than O1s at the moment. An O1B from Rajesh. That's interesting. I think I don't see a lot of O1Bs. So I'm curious, Rajesh, can you let us know in chat what field are you in? I assume you're some sort of an artist. Mariam says H-1B is issued for myself, RFE is sent for my family, and Noid is sent for me.
Interesting. Okay.
Right.
Love to unpack that one.
Yeah. Cool. I'm saying EB1A is the most, so I guess we'll start there, Nicole, and then we'll move on to NIW's O1s. It doesn't matter because we will cover all of it by the end of the hour, so don't worry about it. Um, Rajesh is a media producer. That's interesting. I
That's
still
cool.
don't know what that means, and that's just my like obliviousness. So I'm curious, media producer of a movie production studio, or what exactly media producer of?
I will tell you one thing, Sandaria. The nice thing about O1Bs is that you can be very creative with their titles, right? So long as you can make the argument and you can make it into something that's creative,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of flexibility in the O1B category compared to the O1A.
Yeah, I know because I actually applied for an O1B. It's public, everyone knows about this. I had it denied back in 2022. I filed as a writer in education and technology and got it denied. But I also think the officer was slightly unfair because he or she didn't give a single category, and I know for sure I had evidence for some. But we withdrew and refiled as an O1A next year, and that got approved. So yeah, it's just a side point. Awesome. Feature and short film production. Nice.
uh,
Um,
TV, which is a very interesting subset. Cool.
cool, guys. Welcome to all of you again. This webinar is really meant to provide some context on what's happening in the last 6 months. It has been a very difficult 6 months for a lot of people, especially for international students, for people who are filing talent visas, and in general for anyone who's even thinking of coming to the US in the first place. Every week I get people asking me questions like, should I even come there anymore? Is it worth it? And I'm sure, Nicole, you're getting people asking, should I stay here? Is it worth it? Or should I leave?
Yeah, we get that a lot actually. Like the funny thing is that you would think if you're coming to an immigration law firm, isn't it the question is, oh, I want to come to the US, right? I want to be in the United States, right? But lately I feel like the tables have really shifted. It's like, Nicole, I'm kind of open to coming to the US, or I did get accepted to Harvard, to Yale, right? But I'm really scared. I'm really scared. Is it worth it for me to commit like financially to going to an institution of my dreams if I feel like I don't have a runway once I graduate, right? Or maybe that runway would never appear because I've been here for, or I'm going to be here for a year and then something changes, right? But hopefully, part of today's webinar and this conversation, I know we're focusing a lot of RFEs, but what I'm here to do is give you guys a lot of tools, a lot of resources and insights to kind of avoid a lot of the common pitfalls and at least make you feel empowered that there could be a pathway. There is a way to kind of manifest in yourself control over your destiny here in the United States, right? To the best of my ability, as much as like things always change, right? The reality is that a great advocate, whether it's myself or any attorney, is not supposed to be there just to be your legal services provider, but we're there to support you through your immigration journey. I really should be your thought partner. I really should be someone that you can go to and call. I should not be somebody who, is literally just writing forms for you or writing drafts for you.
Yeah, I think a lawyer once told me that a lawyer's job is, immigration lawyer especially, their job is 70% case filing and 30% being a life coach. Because you're
Yeah.
constantly reassuring people that it's okay, it'll be fine, you'll be fine, we'll get through this. And I know for a fact because I had an RFE denial and then I finally got the approval. So it was a very frustratingly long journey. But cool. With that, let's start with the EB-1A first, Nicole. So
Mhm.
uh, maybe tell us about, have you seen an exponentially high RFE and denial rate this last 6 months compared to last year? Or is it just a slight increase that you're seeing? And what kind of RFEs are being sent these days?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's an exponentially higher. I just feel like there's definitely been an uptick on RFEs generally. So I will tell you what my personal opinion is. Obviously, there's like no true statistics across the board, right? It's more so that my personal opinion when I'm looking at these newer RFEs for EB-1As is I'm surprised by what they are granting criteria wise sometimes, right? And where I'm getting the most pushback or what's being raised the most is the final merits determination, right? So you'll have people who meet 4 criteria, people who meet 5 criteria, 6 criteria, right? And then suddenly they throw down this whole, but, even though you've met all of this criteria and you've given us all of the evidence and blah, 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 we still don't think you're at the top of your field. And here's why, right? And that's what we're seeing the most of. And sometimes they don't even come in an RFE context. I think that you're going to be lucky that it shows up in an RFE. What people are actually getting are notices of intent to deny. They're like, yeah, we accept that you've met the criteria. Now here's 30 days, like really 33 days to figure out how to change our mind, right, about this final merits. And I think one of the most difficult parts about final merits is that in many cases, it just comes down to the personal opinion of the officer. Because when you take a look at the guidelines for final merits, right? If I had to condense it into one sentence, it's a gut check. by the officer? Do you feel that despite all of these things that you are looking in this application, that the person is at the very top of their field? So it can feel very disheartening, because tackling that kind of denial, or that kind of notice of intent to deny, where it's not clear exactly what they're looking for, right, or how to change their mind, just feels like you're going into a black hole, right? But that's not necessarily the case. I think there's definitely patterns. There's definitely things that a lot of people can try to leverage to improve themselves when it comes to dealing with final merits, even when you're early into the process. So for those of you who are talking to me about, oh, I'm in the middle of profile building, there's a lot of what I call seasoning that you can do to really establish yourself and climb over what I call the true Everest of the EB-1A, which is the final merits determination, right? So just to kind of take one step back, just as a reminder for everyone, because everybody knows about the criteria analysis. You have to meet 3 criteria at least out of a possible 10, although there's a hidden 11th category called comparable evidence, right? But after you've met that 3 criteria requirement, they move you into a second step of review known as final merits, where the officer is told, is there some sort of benefit to the person coming to the United States, right? Do you truly feel this person's at the top of their field and they've sustained national and international acclaim, right? That's kind of what we're focusing on here, is that step number 2. But Sandaria, to quickly answer your question, yeah, that's what I've been seeing the most, these noids for final merits.
And I've heard a lot about final merits in the past. Everyone hates it, and I also know it came out of the matter of Kazarian case, which was more than a decade ago. I'm
Yeah.
curious, how have you been battling that and successfully getting the approvals? What can people do even before they file to kind of avoid this in the first place?
So I find that what is the most compelling to try to avoid final merits is 2 things, right? So the first one I'm going to address is actually the biggest thing, which is the officer is usually looking for outside affirmations of you being incredible. So what does that even mean, right? When I say that sentence, right? I actually tell people it's about thinking outside of the box, right? It's not just about the criteria, right? Oh, I've judged this competition, I've judged that competition, I've done peer review for this, this, and that. It's outside of the criteria that you have met. What are things that you have done, right, that show your stature within the community that doesn't really fit into each of the criteria? So I'll give a very thin example. Let's say it's conference presentations, right? And I'm not talking about conference proceedings that turn into scholarly articles. I'm talking about being like a keynote speaker, being part of thought leadership, just kind of being out there, right? And just being able to show to the officer that you're being invited to these things to speak. There's no criteria for presenting at conferences, right? However, when you're writing that prose, or when an attorney is writing that prose at the end that goes into the conclusion of the final merits, imagine like this sentence, right? So you tell them like, oh, this person has been the director of AI at such and such company, right? They established these large backend frameworks of blah 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 blah. And then the next sentence is, in addition to that, they have also been invited as an expert speaker and panelist, right, for XYZ conferences in recognition of their stature within the community, right? Other things that I also try to advise people to consider is, what if you became an advisory member or a board member to a nonprofit STEM initiative, right? So let's say like and a bunch of nonprofits love volunteers. They love people being involved because it's free work, right? The reality is, if you became an advisory member to something that's like, I don't know, teaching code to the next generation, right? Like let's say it's for women, for girls, or for members of the community, right? I get to write in that written prose like, look, this person is also a board member or an advisory member to a well-established nonprofit organization where they advise and cultivate the next generation of talent to meet the US's demands for this particular field. That is a powerful statement, right, to make. So this is what I mean by outside affirmations. It's not just, okay, you've met the criteria. It's these organizations, these situations have consistently proven outside of the criteria that you are an expert in your field, that you have the stature and the standing to be engaged in those activities, right? So the funny thing is that it's not really anything written in the regulations. Like I can't point to the guidelines that says, oh, all of you doing all of this stuff is going to work and be successful. But I find that final merits is about touching the officer themselves, right? As a human being, right? When they're sitting there and they're looking at the application, they're like, wow, that sounds incredible. That's what they need to feel when they're reading that final statement addressing final merits. I think that the best applications have a whole section dedicated to final merits as well in the initial filing, because you really need to lay out the narrative. Sandaria, you and I have talked about this before, whether it's in passing, right? A good EB-1A case is equally narrative driven as it is legally driven, right? There's a legal argument, but backing that legal argument, or really even layered on top, is that story that we're selling to them of how incredible you are as an individual and how credible you are as an individual, right? And that's what we need to do to target final merits, is absorbing that feeling, right, to that officer.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Very interesting. You said a few things. I just put it in the chat box as well for those who haven't checked it. You
Yeah.
said um, it's about touching them directly as to, hey, look at what I've done for my field. Three things you said: being a keynote speaker, being becoming an advisory member, or becoming a board member to nonprofits, STEM initiatives, and so on in your field. I'm curious, what about being on a podcast? Like a YouTube channel invites you to a podcast. What number of subscribers do they have to have for it to have any effect? Is there a number?
I actually don't really think numbers are as important. And that's the crazy part. You know what I think is much more important? I think it's actually the target demographic, right? You could have a podcast that only has 5,000 subscribers, right? But if you can prove its impact, if you can prove its influence, and if you can prove that the target demographic is other industry experts within your field, that's a much more powerful tool to me than millions and millions of people who could not care less about your work, right? So the reason why I say that is because it's not, obviously CNN is worth its weight in gold, right? If you're going to be published or you're going to be on a New York Times or an NPR podcast, like that's a whole other different ballgame, right? But when I'm trying to counsel a client, right, trying to be like, what is achievable, right, is really the first question, right? Don't feel like you have to go to CNN. Don't feel like you have to go to the New York Times. It's about like starting small and starting credible, right? I actually find like setting aside like final merits, a lot of the biggest issues that I see in applications today is everybody's doing the same thing, right? Oh, everybody's being published in the same places. Everybody's getting into the same scholarly articles and scholarly journals, right? So, what is actually hurting those applications is a level of credibility and distinguishment. What makes your application different from the other 10 that's like sitting on the table at this moment, right? And to me, it actually comes across much more genuine when you're on those smaller podcasts or those smaller, let's call it publications or media pieces, because it feels organic, it feels realistic, right? And I know that sounds so strange because when you're trying to prove EB-1A, you're trying to prove that you're at the top of your field. But what does that even mean? What does the field even mean? Are you trying to say that you're the best software engineer across all software engineers? Or are you the best software engineer that is related to cloud architecture, specifically in AWS or anything? Or is it that you're the best, like, algorithm designer for like search entity functions, right? Like you can subdivide your field of extraordinary ability. Don't feel like you have to be the best engineer in the whole engineering field. You just have to be the best engineer in your particular niche and your particular, let's argue, occupational field.
Mm. So podcasts work, and in fact, you're suggesting it's better if you go for not a renowned outlet, rather go for like niche, small ones in your field.
I
Uh,
mean, if you can achieve a renowned one, that's great. I
right.
think it's more like I'm trying to be very realistic about people's opportunities. And I feel that it's better to target those because you're more likely to get in, you're more likely to be able to be seen in some form or way. And you can ultimately leverage those opportunities into bigger opportunities. People have to start somewhere, right? I would like to think that most of the people who are on this chat, like you're not going to be able to immediately approach like those big million subscriber podcasts, right? I think that's going to be very, very tough, right?
Yeah.
So where do I start and how do I invest my time the most wisely? You got to start there. And I would say focus on influence and focus on target demographic, because that's usually the biggest heavy hitters that I can use as an advocate if I'm trying to make an argument, right?
So I'm seeing a few questions in chat. Let me start picking them one by one.
Mm-hmm.
Ram has a bit of an overarching question. Ram's an IT architect.
Mm-hmm.
Ram got all three criteria for the EB-1A, but didn't get the EB-1 because of final merits, and it got denied in June 2025. So just a couple months ago. What are some ways to strengthen? And I'm planning to reapply later this year. Any inputs based on how to battle this now? I feel like you kind of answered this.
A little bit.
Any specific advice for an IT architect?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask a quick follow-up question. I don't know if you're still here, Ram, right? Was one of the
Yeah.
categories that you got the contributions? Like, can you tell me like which of the three criterias you hit and which ones were missed, if you don't mind?
Okay. Hi. So I have three criterias. One is the
Oh.
I did a stupid thing. Instead of spotlighting Ram, I kicked him out by mistake. I'm so sorry. He's joining back.
Okay.
Hey Ram, are you there?
Oh no.
Zoom is really small here. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Like, I'm gonna
yeah.
make a
Yeah,
Ram.
he's back. I'm so sorry. Just keep talking.
Hey, sorry. Okay. So I got three criterias. One is judge. I got it.
Okay.
And original scientific scholarly articles.
Okay.
And then the media.
Media. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And then
so you didn't get like lead critical role, I assume.
right.
And you didn't get high remuneration, or did you try to argue original contributions?
Original contribution.
Okay. So I will tell you in like just pure instinct, right? Lead critical role is one of those categories where I feel like you kind of have to hit for the EB-1A, right? Like I know that technically it's about hitting at least three criteria, right? But it does have an impact to the officer's opinion of you in a final merits context. If it's like, well, how can you be in the top of your field if I don't agree that you've ever held a leadership position within your field or you've never held a critical role in your field, right? The other thing with original contributions, like you mentioned, that's not one of the categories that you managed to get hit, right? Original contributions is one of the ones where, like, if you manage to achieve it, I find that 9 times out of 10 that case gets approved, right? Because I think the officers are like, wow, like to be of major significance, to have done something to that extent and knowing the high standards of that particular category, it immediately flips their opinion of you, right? So if I were in your shoes and you're saying, Nicole, how do I improve my odds, right? How do I improve my foundation here to get across the finish line to get into final merits? Number one, for sure, is improving your lead critical role argument, right? I have no idea what you submitted. If you relied solely on letters of recommendation, that is not the best way to argue, in my point of view, especially in this day and age. The officers don't find them as compelling as they used to be, right? So even if you have letters of recommendation that list out all the things that you did, it is always best to try to supplant it with outside evidence, but you can be clever about it, right? So let's say you were working at a company like AWS, which never, like Amazon will never give you documentation. Like you can't print that stuff out. You can't show the proprietary work that you did, right? But you managed to get a letter of recommendation for someone that you used to work for, or they left the company and they did it on their personal letterhead. They said, Ram designed this thing for our company, or did this framework for a company, or was responsible for this project, right? Fantastic.
Yeah.
So now you have that letter. Now, what if that project, even if your name is not on it, right, was referenced in the media somewhere, like, oh, Amazon made some changes, or AWS rolled out some improvements, and like they did some cloud architecture stuff, right? Sometimes I use that as the supplementary evidence to show that it did happen, even if you are not referenced in that article. What I tell people is that letters of recommendation should bridge the legal argument with the evidence that I show, right? So if I can show the article and the bridge is the letter of recommendation that basically goes, well, Ram was on that thing, right? He worked on that project, and here's the proof that that project even existed, right? That means that to me, I could at least try to argue that more likely than not, which is the standard that the government is looking for. 51% of the time, did this thing really happen, yes or no, right? 51% of the time, right?
Yeah.
They're not saying 100% of the time, right? It's more likely that this thing probably really happened because there was an article about it. So be clever, right? And don't hesitate to even focus on old projects. You might think, oh my God, Nicole, it's 2025, the thing that I did in 2013, where am I going to find articles? There's a wonderful tool known as the Wayback Machine, right? So go on that website, go way back in time to all of those web pages from back in the day, see what you can find, right? I've been able to find like old ratings from like 2009, right? Which is like amazing. But that's the way that I think about it. Lead critical role, you need to hit really, really hard. Original contributions is a bit harder. I don't know if you have patents. I don't know if maybe your IT framework was a back end for like a major company, but don't sell yourself short. Some practitioners seem to really hollow themselves in and basically go, oh, it was only for the benefit of the company. But what about the end clients, right? What about the users? What about like the revenue? What about like who ended up using those tools, right? Like the best advocate is going to widen those arguments as much as they can. They should not shy away just because practice has dictated something for so long. I think the best thing that we can do is to show as much as we can. Because original contributions, even if it doesn't hit, I like to use it as the opportunity to just show the officer more about you that doesn't really fit into any of the other criteria.
Yeah, it's clear. So even though my name is not having anywhere accounted in any of the websites, but can I show it as a proof of that?
Yeah, so what I meant is that you need to use it as a supplementary proof. And then you use the letter of recommendation to bridge the gap, right? Hey, like let's say Amazon like released a brand new remote control, right? Obviously they're not going to say who designed the remote control, it's just they made a new remote control, right? The letter will then be the one to say that you did the remote control, right? If I show both of that pieces, then I can say, yeah, they developed the technology and here's how the technology got released, right? So that's what I would consider for lead critical role. And that's what I mean by being clever about it. I always tell people it's not about proving beyond a reasonable doubt 100% of the time that you did it. It's about proving that 51% of the time it was more likely that you did do it than not doing it, period. Right?
Makes sense.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ram.
Thank
I
you.
see a lot of questions, Nicole, so I'm going to move on to the next one. This will be a quick response, I think. Does designation title play a key role in merit determination or in general for EB-1A petition? Like, yeah, the title you have at your job role.
So you're saying like, oh, do I have to be a CEO? Do I have to be a CTO? Do I have to show that versus like software engineer level 2 or principal engineer, right? So of course, like they do have a little bit of an impact, right? No matter what, it's a case of first impression. There is a strength that comes from being like a CEO, a CTO, something that's so amazing, right? But I also think that the officers are a little bit smarter than that, right? I think they actually do take a look at what that even means because anybody can become a CEO. This is what I mean. Like you could start an LLC and you'll be like, oh, I'm a CEO of this LLC. Look at all this cool stuff that I did, right? If anything, I think what matters more than title is what can you back up to show what it is that you did that is amazing, right? So don't feel stressed out if you like have a title that just says software engineer, right? Or that you have a title that's like SVP, which could mean like a billion different things in like financial institutions, right? What you need to focus on is what can I prove that I did that is really cool and compelling. And I say really cool because, again, the officers only have so much time to read an application. So if something comes across cool, right, that actually goes a really long way compared to any title, my point of view.
So, okay. So your answer is, yeah, first impressions matter because they're human beings. So yes,
Yeah.
but also don't worry about it because it's out of your control as well. You can't change your designation.
Because the reality is that it's rebuttable. So I know that we're trying to avoid the RFE, but the RFE can occur, right? But there's so much like case law where, and a lot of like, because we've seen it in other RFEs where they're like, job titles don't matter, right? Job titles are only like not deterministic. Like there's so much to that. A good attorney would cite to that stuff if they're rebutting it, being like, how could you say that this person's not a lead critical role just because your title is this, right? You're not going to see an RFE that says that because you're a CEO, you're not a CEO, you're not going to have lead critical role, right? They will always go into, well, you're not in a leadership position because you don't oversee people, right? You're not in a critical role because you're not doing something critical that is essential to the organization. We don't know the impact of your work, right? So that's the reason why, yes, you're right, a first impression can be helpful, but it's not all there is to it, right? A good application instead would highlight, hey, yeah, that's my job title, but look at all this stuff that I was responsible for. That's what they're really looking for.
Got it. Okay, we have an interesting case from Tulsi. Tulsi, if you're still on the call, you can unmute yourself once I ask your question, if Nicole has a follow-up. Tulsi says the application was got an RFE. Their expertise is performing artist and movement specialist. That's yoga and kinesiology. Two of the categories were approved and received an RFE for, the third category probably. And the RFE was quite generic, apparently, just saying stuff like not enough to prove that the individual was at the top of the field. And the question is, what are some things I could do to strengthen my profile besides just hitting the three criteria? So if you have any follow up to Tulsi, go ahead.
Not enough to prove that the individual was at the top of their field. Okay. All right. So I'm going to make the assumption that you maybe filed with premium processing, right?
That is
Maybe.
correct.
Yeah. Okay, Dulcie, right? And I can make the assumption that you probably didn't get the RFE until like the second to last day or last day of the RFE timeline. Is that like, as in like the premium processing timeline? Is that accurate?
Something like it was tight. It was really tight.
It was tight. Okay. Right. So sometimes when you see like these quote unquote barely there RFE responses where they're like making vague references, it's a timing issue, right? At the end of the day, when you pay for premium processing, the officer has like two choices, right? Within this 15 business day timeline, do I approve the case, right? Or do I issue an RFE? Now, of course, like the officer does have that choice to approve it, but they also have a supervisor, right? At some point, all of their cases are going to be audited and they're going to be like, why did you approve this case, right? Tell me like the reasoning behind you approving this case. I can't prove it. I can only tell you that sometimes they do issue an RFE because they're running out of time, right? They don't necessarily want to refund the $2,805 that you provided to them, and they're legally, to some degree, obligated to give you an answer within that time frame, right? For a lot of my clients, I try to reach a level of compromise where I said nowadays you see it on the news. They halve the number of people who work for USCIS, right? There's been an uptick in the number of applications that are going in. Sometimes I want to give them a little bit of time just to let them cook and like sit on the application before I upgrade to premium processing, right? So those are sometimes the, let's say, practical realities that can trigger some of these more vague RFEs. Sometimes the key language that I see is, you submitted the cover letter, the exhibit page, and other documents. What other documents? what are you talking about, right? And then they start citing to this case law that like was like, oh, in an RFE, they don't have to address every single piece of evidence and why, they didn't like it. They just have to generally address it, right? That's what I've been seeing in some of the RFEs as they do this thing, right? So I know that your question is, what do I need to do to deal with this? What can I do to strengthen my profile besides hitting the three criteria, right? If you are only missing one criteria, right, and it's one that you already feel pretty strong about, then it's really strengthening the possible response to it. And it's unclear to me which criteria that you tried to argue for that you got an RFE for. So Tulsi, can you tell me what is the third criteria that you tried to argue for?
Right. Mine got approved in the judging and also exhibition and showcase for the performing artist. And two of the other criteria that we submitted was for commercial success, and the other one was published materials. So the published materials, what I did have some, I would say, some documents and the points that they would want to consider to approve them, but they decided to kind of throw that under the bus, saying that it's actually not so significant, even though some of um, the the newspaper, those are like not the online ones that like published really actually like printed media. So that was one of the things. Commercial success, of course, like I can understand. That's kind of like arbitrary, that can be argued, but yeah, those are the other two that did not get approved. And also, of course, like some like law jargons, immigration related jargons that I have no idea. So finally, my law firm, they decided to kind of withdraw the case. I mean, they advised me to withdraw. They didn't like make the decision. I did, of course, at the end. But they recommended that I withdraw only because of how the RFE and the whole document was worded.
Okay. So I was about to say commercial success is a pretty thin line, right? Because they're saying in the performing arts, and you would need to argue. Like I know you're a performing artist, but I think when they look at it as yoga and kinesiology, I feel like they might be a little confused about whether or not it really truly falls under the performing arts. Like let's say, But the other thing that you were mentioning, which is like the published materials, like I guess you're saying that you showed newspaper clippings, but they didn't agree that it was a publication, which is an interesting one. I feel like that's kind of interesting. I don't know if any media kits were provided or any explanations were provided about the significance of the media. But the one thing I wanted to say, because of how unique your profession is, right? You're saying you're a performing artist and a movement specialist, right? Please don't shy away from comparable evidence arguments, guys, right? If you're in a very unique field and you're in something that's just so different from like a lot of other people, the government acknowledges in the guidances that like it's not a one size fits all, right? Like when they designed the EB-1A, it's not like they perceived every single kind of occupation known to mankind, right? So I'll give you an example. Medical doctors. Not every single MD in the world has done a bunch of research projects, right, and been published in research papers, right? Usually they're practitioners, right? I practice. Maybe I'm a plastic surgeon and I did a lot of plastic surgery, right? But they do conferences. They do conference presentations, and those conference presentations are sometimes really, really competitive, right? And considered a mark of excellence within their world, within their universe, let's call it, right? So maybe, Tulsi, is there something that is considered recognition within your field? It's not an award. Is it something that is normal within your industry and what it is that you do that could be argued as, hey, this is what shows that I'm at the top of my particular field, right? I feel like that is a discussion to unpack because of how unique your I guess mixture is, right? And if I was like working with you as an attorney, I would want to spend conversations being like, you need to tell me like your career path, right? How did you end up here, right? Why is this kind of something that you decided, right? What are things that people are amazed about by you when you meet other people? When you go to a cocktail party and you meet other yoga specialists and you meet other kinesiologists, what is it that you talk about that makes them go, ooh, ah, right? That's what I would unpack and I would consider when it comes to dealing with this. Because when you're saying besides hitting the 3 criteria, maybe you need to think about the 4th amazing criteria, which is the comparable evidence, because you're in a weird field, to be fair.
Understandable. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, my O1 had like 3 pages of comparable evidence, but that was an outlier because I had been on many podcasts and social media presence and a bunch of other things that really helped. But I would say, don't shy away from including even things like publishing in Medium if your article gained a ton of views, using that in comparable evidence.
For sure,
So,
for sure.
Nicole, I'm seeing a lot of questions. So
That's
I'm so
okay.
sorry, guys. I think we're gonna have to pick a few and like maybe go a little deeper on those. I'm gonna pick Jane's question, which is interesting because Jane is still on an F1 student visa or F1 visa, like maybe just graduated, let's assume. Jane wants to file for an EB-1A. Field is
Mhm.
AI with a focus on ML, machine learning, and natural language processing. Early in my career right now. Maybe you can take this as like a question for anyone on the call who is not, like Tulsi, who has already filed the EB1, but someone who is still early enough that they're building evidence. Kind of like a generic advice of what can they do to build towards an EB1. And if you can be specific on AI, please go ahead.
Absolutely. So I will say the first thing that I tell anybody who's a student or anyone who's an F1 and they're coming to me being like, oh my God, what do I do? I actually tell them that you need to network first, right? You have to establish like a baseline credibility in order to build into any of the categories, right? I cannot turn someone who's never done a single thing, right, into the top of the field, right? How can I leverage your like baseline education to get you into judging opportunities if you've never worked a day in your life, right? Or you don't have the right connections. So I always tell every single student, you need to start talking to your professors. Professors are like a wealth of knowledge, right? And that's because they're scholars. They're scholars through and through. So you know what scholars do for a living other than teaching in academia, right? They write research papers. They're in those databases. They do peer review, and they're usually part of editorial boards, right? And those editorial boards can fast track you into databases in the long run, right? Nobody's saying that you need to build when you're a freshman, right? In college, right? No one's saying that you need to be sitting there being like, oh, I need to do peer review before I've even graduated. No, it's about setting up the ramp setting up the runway to get to the point where you can start building into those things. Now, when it comes to AI and artificial intelligence, let me tell you, the sooner that you join an organization like IEEE, the better it is for you. But it's not about the memberships argument. I know everybody's gonna be like, oh, IEEE, you know, senior membership, all this kind of stuff. Like, oh my God, like that's not like helpful and the government doesn't like it and everybody has it, right? My whole thing about joining some of these organizations has nothing to do with making an associations argument. It's about the networking part, right? Can you get into those conference databases? Can you become a session chair? Can you be part of the panel? Can you be part of all the things that could be in existence related to those organizations? AAAI has a lot of events, right? And it's, again, networking, getting your name out there, building the baseline credibility so that an attorney like myself or the resources that are out there can say, okay, great. So you're a member of AAAI, right? You've been to a few conferences, you've been on smaller panels, even if you were like a young student panelist, right? Those activities exist, right? I can start with that to like show you the other opportunities that you can leverage into, like hackathons and the like, right? Another cool thing that I've also suggested to a lot of like students, let's say, is open source projects, right? Open source projects. Why? They're free. They're volunteer, right? They're kind of fun for some people if that's something that excites you. Why are open source projects so fun? Is because the right open source project can be proven as impactful, right? Imagine, right? You publish something on GitHub and it gets like hundreds of downloads, right? That to me is an accolade. Where are the stars coming from, right? Why are people using this free work that you're providing to the general public, right? It's not really an income generation thing. It's about establishing, again, credibility within the community, right? Those 100 stars can build up into bigger and brighter things that I can show to the general public, or even like, let's say it's press, right? You did a really cool project, right? You decide to talk to an industry publication, like a small journal that focuses on AI, and look at this cool little thing that you did, a gizmo that can flag wildfires like 200 yards away or something, right? The reality is that you guys who are in AI, you are in the cusp of like a new era, right? We're in the AI era. There's so much interest within your field. And I know quantum computing is like the next big thing, right? So if you guys can touch it to that, I'm telling you it's the next big thing as far as I'm aware, right? There's a lot of people who are interested in your work. Open source is a good place to start building that credibility, and you can slide right into all the expert panels that you need to once you have those open source projects under your belt.
So I put on a few stuff in the chat, like as you were speaking.
Yeah.
But honestly, the summary of what you're saying, I'm just taking it as you can't make up evidence if you don't have anything. So you have to start from what is possible, that is at the end of your arm, which is reaching out to places where you can volunteer, networking with people, talking to professors, and offering help as an assistant. Just whatever you can do right now in the next 3 days. Start from there.
Also talk to community groups. I'm sorry to like push that out there, right? Like I find that when you're a student in college, sometimes you kind of get, I wouldn't say jaded, you get kind of tied up in like exactly what you're doing in that moment, and you start forgetting about like the future and like what you need to do for your future. It's like kind of weird, right? Because you're so enveloped into the community, like the culture of that moment, whether it's like partying or like enjoying your college opportunities, or when you're a freshman, you're like, I got 4 years, 5 years, 6 years to like figure all this stuff out, right? But honestly, the earlier that you sow those seeds, the more that they're going to sprout in the long run. And the earlier that you start, the better position that you are in, regardless of policy changes. You never know when the rug is going to be pulled underneath you, right? What if there's a reality that STEM OPT gets shortened to 2 years instead of 3 years? What if OPT disappears? What if all these things? I wish I could have gone back in time and started those networking opportunities, that I could have talked to the right people who are going to get me into the right places, right? So you're absolutely right, Sundarya. It's about establishing that baseline and then building up from there.
Awesome. Moving on to a different question, a different scenario. Sri Harsh is a senior applied scientist at a startup, 5 years experience in total. Sriharsh has a paper that is upcoming where he is a first author at a pretty reputed conference. But before this, he only has one publication with 8 citations. And it's going to take time before the citations for this new publication racks up, this new paper that's being published. What are some ways to make sure I can ensure this work contributes to other pillars besides just authorship or show impact? So he is applying for O1A though, not EB-1A. So the bar is lower here.
The bar is lower. That is correct, right? It's really funny because I always like think about the regulations behind scholarly articles, and I don't see anything about freaking citations, right? I don't see anything that's like, you need to have 200,000 citations, you need to have 200 citations, but I get what you're feeling, right? Did I sustain a level of a claim? Is there like the totality of evidence argument and all this kind of stuff, right? So I'll give you a really great answer in my point of view. So I don't know what you mean by applied scientists. Like, I'm going to assume that you do maybe things that touch upon engineering or much more practical levels of application, right? Because this is the advice that I give. Oh, sorry
to interrupt you. I work in AI. I work with natural language
processing. Okay. All right, beautiful. So it touches engineering, to be honest with you, right? So this is the answer I give to a lot of engineers who are like, oh my God, Nicole, I only have 10, 20, 30, maybe even 100 citations if you're lucky, right? Engineering is a practical field. Engineering is not like the traditional natural sciences where research is so progressive that you're going to naturally get a ton of citations. There are, of course, AI scientists, and there are, of course, certain engineers who do have those levels of citations, but it's not natural within your particular field. It's not like biology and chemistry and like material sciences, right? So what I tell a lot of people for engineering is that actually what would be much more helpful to show impact is press, podcast, discussions about your work, or right, some way to prove, and I hesitate to say letters because that's kind of one way, but it's not the best way, to prove that your work has been applied on a practical level. Because if you discovered something really cool in AI, like let's say it's like, I discovered a faster way to establish like an algorithm to remove split order systems, within like large distribution networks like Amazon and Walmart or whatever it is, right? Like those kinds of things, right? It's more likely that even if you publish that paper, that some guy at a logistics company read the paper and put it into his own work at the company than he is to publish his own research and cite to your work. That's just the novel life. Like, that's just how it works, right? So what you need to do to best position yourself, if you don't have a lot of citations, but your work has a more practical application, is try to reach out to other engineers within the community or other people who are AI scientists and be like, would you use my work in your field? Have you used my work in your field? Do you have a practical application? Can you speak to the implications of my work? Would you say those things, right? There are some people who say like, oh, these are called letters of appreciation. Like, I appreciate your work. I don't think of it that way. I need proof that people are utilizing your work in some way. And usually for engineers, that's one way to figure it out, right? I don't know exactly what it is that you made. So it's hard for me to like tell you exactly like where you need to be looking for, but you'd be surprised at how many like professors or how many people on LinkedIn or some of the engineering community groups or like things like AAAI or IEEE, you show them your work, they think it's really cool, and they might be willing to say something really positive about the impact of your work and how they're utilizing it in their own work. Or maybe they do end up using it because you showed it to them, if it's really that good.
Thank you. Yeah.
There's no like surefire answer, unfortunately, for this one, Sundaria, but I do think that sometimes people get so hooked on to like the citation thing when they forget that citations aren't everything, right? Yeah. And that in engineering, it's such a practical field. Not everybody's just doing research and making citations like the chemists are.
And also, it's worth noting that the criteria for all of these visas were written in 1990, when obviously I think there was a bias towards researchers and not as much towards product managers or content creators, or there was no content creation back then. So I think that's something to keep in mind. So
For sure.
This is a different question altogether. It doesn't even talk about profile building, but Miriam wants to ask, I think Miriam got an RFE for an H-4, a dependent visa. They requested again all the pre-submitted documents for marriage contract and kids' birth certificates, which were already submitted. Why did they do that? And then they sent a NOID, a notice of intent to deny.
So this is going to sound like, I wouldn't say it's like really bad, but it's like a very honest answer, which is that this is a big organization. It's a huge agency, USCIS, right? I think I mentioned earlier, I feel like they have the number of people who work there, right? That's like a whole initiative of lessening government expenditures. I am like 95% sure they fired all of the people that used to be contractors that did all the mailroom stuff and all the file management stuff. To be honest with you, Mariam, they might have just lost the file. And that's the reason why they're asking you for the documents again. Because if you're telling me that you did submit the marriage certificate, You submitted the birth certificate, and now they're they're mailing you saying like, hey, we need them. They probably lost it. And the only thing that I can tell you is, unfortunately, you should just submit it again. You can make a reference that says that I did submit it in the earlier packet, but just, respectfully, here's like the new, like the new copies, just so you can have them, right?
Yeah.
It sucks. But at the end of the day, I think we have to remember that these are all human-run organizations, right? You and I are human
Yeah.
beings, right?
Yeah.
And like,
Sorry.
and I think someone just lost the file.
I think Mariam, are you trying to say something?
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting that, every single document is requested again, despite sending the whole thing. And it was, yeah, like clear. It was translated because it was not issued in the US. So, yeah, but fair enough. I think, yeah, we're humans and it could be like a mistake. Correct.
Like, I have a friend who used to work in one of those mail rooms, right? It's like a friend of a friend. And like what he was telling me was like, Nicole, like if you knew, like we're literally manually carrying these files to somebody.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like this is not like infrastructure is a consistent problem in America because we had our industrial revolution like a long time ago, right? And compared to other countries who had like their leap forward later on in like the decades, right? It's just a lot to fix.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mariam. So another interesting case on NIW this time. Mayank Mathur is asking, Mayank received an RFE on an NIW case. Mayank's working as a project manager for a solar company, so in the field of renewable energy. Interestingly, USAI has mentioned that the substantial criteria is met, but they don't have enough evidence to justify national importance. So this is, a quick like lesson for people maybe is NIW has 3 prongs, and the first prong says your work has to be of substantial merit and of national importance, right? And so the question is, my case had a lot of recommendation letters, support letters. I'm now working on a new model which would kind of showcase my work on a national scale. Should I also try to get some expert opinion letters?
I'm going to take one step back here, right? Because you're in renewable energy, right? The reason why I want to take one step back is because we happen to be under potentially an administration that doesn't really prioritize this stuff compared to the previous administration, right? Like there was a time where like a year ago, like a cultural anthropologist trying to, sustain and maintain Native American arts in the United States was like a compelling argument for national interest. It's of national interest to maintain the culture of Native Americans, right? But now we're living in a day and age where the government is like, well, our priorities have shifted, right? We don't think that this is a national interest issue compared to a lot of these other things that we are contemplating, right? So if you're at this stage with an RFE, right, and you argued that you're doing renewable energy, you're in a solar company and the like, I would actually consider, it's not about even refiling. I'm not even going to walk there, right? Some people will encourage you to do that. And if you want to do that, that's fine. Take a look at your initial filing and see how you can expand it reasonably without going way too far and straying from your initial application. And think about a problem statement that the current administration has talked about related to solar panels or renewable energy, right? Now, I don't have a specific idea for you right now because the reality is that I'm not a subject matter expert in renewable energy. But I will tell you, like, there's stuff related to nitrogen that the current administration's intrigued about, stuff related to, is there an easier and cleaner way to do fracking in the United States and oil drilling, even though it's not exactly the best for the environment, right? There was a really cool case that that I've seen get approved, which was this person did renewable energy or did sustainable energy. Maybe I'm like using the terms a little bit wrong, but they helped kind of design these nitrogen programs for oil drillers, right? So that there was like this zero waste kind of thing. Like, I'm sorry, I'm really bad with some of the terms because I'm like thinking about like a case in the past, right? And that's kind of how we turned it around, right? We turned it around because, okay, new renewable energy is not important, but fracking is now. Oil drilling is super important under this administration, right? They're lobbying in that direction, right? So I think it's like expanding upon your initial idea or your initial endeavor, and what you argued for was of national interest, because clearly whatever that you argued for to the officer was not enough, right? So take one step back, think about a problem statement that is related to your organ, like to what it is that you do, right? And then expand that way.
Thank you for your feedback. I think my initial support letter was like 390 pages long, so I'm
But that's the
not
thing.
really sure.
That's is too long, right? I think that's also honestly, like, I don't think any cover letter should be 390 pages long, right? A good EB-2A should be like 30
I think
pages.
maybe he meant the entire petition. Your
Ah,
entire
Yeah, the entire petition. Sorry, the support
Okay,
letter
all
was
right.
just
I was
like
like, oh,
20
the cover
pages
letter is
long.
390 pages long. Okay, that's part of the root cause, right? So, yeah, I
Was
understand.
supported with,
You've provided a lot of evidence, right? It is true, and it is unfortunate that maybe they just didn't see something. But I find that RFEs are opportunities to retry. You haven't been denied yet, right? I think a lot of people think of an RFE as like a death knell, right? Oh, they don't want to approve my case. When the reality is that in some RFEs, they really lay out what they're looking for. They're like, hey, man, right? We can't approve it because of X, Y, and Z. The reason why us attorneys, like when I started as a junior attorney, one of the first things that I ever did was RFEs, is because it's cases that the issues have been spotted for you, right? The issues have been spotted for you. Nicole, make an argument against it. And because I did a lot of those RFEs in the past, and even today I still do them, right? Like when I see like those cases, they give me insights into what I need to do for the initial filings, right? So Mayank, right? I know that you've submitted a lot of stuff, right? Really take my advice to heart about the problem statement. You need to be looking at the news. You need to be looking at what is the current administration's priorities. Don't just cite to like acts. Don't just cite to like proclamations, right? I'm telling you, like the mainstream media really does talk a lot about the problems, right? You display that problem and you sit down and you're like, what is it in my role at the solar company when I'm driving all this renewable energy stuff? How can I connect the dots together, right? How can I present a solution to this problem statement that's associated to my work? That's like a really big part of it. I know that you had the recommendation letters, and I know that you had like a business model and all this kind of stuff, but you're asking me, how do I prove national importance of my work? How do I prove that this is at a national stage and a national problem? No recommendation letter in the world is going to prove that, in my point of view, right? You can get an expert opinion letter maybe that supports it, one of many professors in the world, right? But it's easier to prove if it's superbly documented in the press that this is a problem, right? And the government's acknowledgement of that problem, and that you have a strong resolution to that problem.
Awesome.
and I feel that they brought it up, especially because my employer has a limited geographical presence. They only work in the DMV region, Maryland, Washington, and Virginia, and that's probably one of the reasons why they brought it up like that.
Sure, but let's unpack that. You said that you're in the Virginia, DC region, right? That's what you said?
Yeah,
Isn't that
Maryland.
how all the government
Maryland.
facilities are for like
Yep.
federal stuff? All right, so tell me, like, how do you figure out like the renewable energy or like the energy problems in the national grid for where all the federal buildings are?
Yeah, so the way we presented it in the petition was like, because we are doing a lot of green roof projects in the Washington D.C. region, so that would itself like promote the global sustainable initiative of the previous government, which is unfortunately not a part of the current government's plan. So
You're right. You're pointing out though like the key issue, and what I'm trying to point out to you is like ideas that I would kind of jam with someone, right? If you're telling me, okay, the government has an issue that a lot of my work is in a specific region, I feel like I just pointed out to you that DC and Virginia is the home of the federal government, right? The federal related things, right? So if you're telling me, Nicole, how do I prove national importance? How do I show that my work as a project manager at a renewable company has an impact to these federal buildings because they are running the whole country, right? So I don't know what projects or companies working on. I don't know what green roofs they're doing it. Are they doing green roofs for the Capitol? Are they doing green roofs for the DoD? Are they doing green roofs for the FBI headquarters? I don't know, right? Unpack those projects. How do they help? How do they sustain the government? Is there a national grid issue that you're responsible for? And that's why you have those renewable energy projects with them, right? I think it's about really thinking outside of the box and how to tie it to national importance, even if you're geographically constrained, right? So, Samdar.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, we're at time.
Thank you.
So
Yep. Thank you so much for your feedback. That was really helpful.
yeah,
I'm gonna try to do maybe 2 more questions, Nicole, if you don't mind.
that's fine. That's fine. I know that everybody here like might have been interested in like the H-1B RFE stuff, but I think the EB-1 and EB-2 is like a healthy
Yeah.
conversation.
I just think folks are already on H-1B, so they probably don't care about that part. All right. This is more of a slightly overarching question from Rimsha, which is Rimsha is a PhD student. Very few publications, but they're mostly first author. They have a lot of NASA-funded projects on applying ML to space weather problems, not listed on any grant, but leading this specific project technically. How can I prove original contribution and critical role without getting RFE? I mean, I guess RFEs, you might still get it, but still, how can you prove it?
Okay, so PhD student, so I'm just breaking down. PhD student working on a NASA-funded project, applying machine learning to space weather programs. That's interesting. Problems, right? Not listed officially on any grant, but leading the specific project technically. How can I prove original contributions and critical role without getting an RFE? So you're right, Sundarya, cannot guarantee in any circumstance that an RFE won't happen, even if I gave you as much advice as I could and as much of a discussion as I could, right? So let's start first with critical role, right? You may not be listed on any of the grants, right? But you need to think about what is it that you do for this project? What is it that you contribute to the functional output of this project, right? I tell a lot of people who do critical role to think about their jobs in a workflow statement. So what is a workflow statement, right? Imagine you wrote your job in a timeline, basically like a straight arrow, right? And the end of that arrow should be what is the output of your role. So let's say you're a software engineer and you're developing like software, right? So the end output is the software, like whatever software project it is, right? You need to write in like what is it, every single thing that you do from that beginning to the end point and where you contribute to that output, right? That is the best document any client could ever give to me, right? Because it makes it easier for me to identify why you're so critical. So in your particular case, right, if you're going to be applying machine learning to space weather programs, right, and the end output is that you're designing, I'm sorry if I'm using bad terminology, right, some sort of algorithm or like software that's going to like detect something, right? So what is it that you did to create that output, right? Were you designing the code, or is it that you're overseeing 2 junior staff, right? Or is it that you are the one that's reviewing the final code? Are you like dealing with vendors? Like I have no idea, right? When I thread all of those things together, right, is how I show that you're critical to the function of your role, which is the output, right? So that's what I mean, right? So when it comes to critical role and making that argument, it's showing every single contribution that you have into the output of your work. That's how you're critical. The other thing that you also need to consider is the output of your work even critical to the program as a whole, right? If the whole program is shaped around this machine learning thing, then that's an easy one, right? Professor, organization cannot maintain their grant without showing this work. Fine, right? But that's one way I would consider it. Creating a workflow statement makes it really easy, illustrative wise and narrative wise, for the officer to understand why you're so critical, right? Because it's a visualization of your work, right? And then the other thing too, when it comes to original contributions, that's a tougher one, right? It's tougher because original contributions technically can be past tense. Now, there are good arguments for people who have like patent pending things, right? But what I mean by past tense is that the government is not saying that you need to have original contributions that could have major significance. The government is asking you for original contributions of major significance, right? So if your work is too prospective and it hasn't really culminated in anything, that is the toughest argument you can make for original contributions of major significance. The only catch that I have is that if you're doing something that's so innovative and so novel, and there's discussion and chatter, and you can get enough what I call independent expert opinion letters to support how novel it is, and even more powerful than that, imagine if NASA issued you a letter or issued a letter somewhere that's like, listen, like this stuff, right, is like the next big thing or is the big thing, and that's why we're investing all this money into it, right? That could be compelling enough. Because the weird thing about original contributions of major significance is that it's kind of like that category where I think the officer also does a gut check. There's a level of subjectivity of what it means to be of major significance, right? Some officers may feel like, national government agency put a lot of money into this, right? That feels like it's significant because we're interested in it. But yeah, those are my suggestions in that scenario in both regards.
We're at the top of the hour. I will ask one last question, and it's a pretty long question. I'm going to try to simplify this. And Taranjit, I know you've been patiently waiting all this time, probably to ask your question. So maybe I'll just let Taranjit ask the question. Taranjit, can you be brief in just like summarizing the question you want to ask to Nicole?
Thank you so much. My title is a project manager, but I'm an individual contributor. My undergrad was medicine and my master's was MBA and healthcare administration. My work is very, very unique, but my title is because it's a big company, it's across 5 states. So they had to have like a very equal titles. So my work is to challenge the physicians and make sure their utilization management is thorough, as in like they cannot order too many ultrasounds, they cannot order too many x-rays. So my work is physician training, challenging their utilization management and keeping their quality up. When the quality is up, they get grants, we get money, managed care, it ties to the incentive. So my lawyers are suggesting to go for the NIW because I don't have media, I don't have publication, but it's very unique work. My physicians are very willing to write letters for me, letters of support. I also help my physicians, the younger physicians who have just graduated and then joined our company who are under guarantee. I help them with their charts preparation for the patients, and I also help them for the conferences. They are happily willing to give me credits for conferences too. So one, I want to understand how can I first, should I still go for NIW? And then the second one is, I did work as a healthcare worker during COVID years, and I was a big contributor towards telemedicine. Like within a week, we were able to get vaccines and establish those clinics. And I was one of the managers who basically helped out in creating telehealth as well in Southern California.
So I think number one, because I'm noticing this, right? You have a lot of content. You have a lot of different like things, and like you're kind of like throwing it across the board, right? The first thing that any reasonable attorney needs to do with you is condense all of that. You guys, you need to find one thing. You need to find one idea, right? Because if you start like saying, telehealth and utilization and like saving this and saving that, the government and the officer is going to sit there and be like, so what exactly is your endeavor? Like what exactly is it that you're doing that's of national interest, right? Because you can't do it all, right? You can't cure healthcare, right? You can't say that like I'm going to save all of healthcare. I'm going to make healthcare completely as an institution be easier, right? So you got to focus on one thing, and you got to leverage on the things that not only do you have the most experience in, but let's talk about more about being well positioned too. Right? Because if you are currently working as a project manager, and you said that you focus on quality and you focus on them not like, let's say, wasting time or like ordering too many things, right? Like that to me is an easier argument to make than going back into your COVID years. And the only reason why I say that is because you're in the role right now. What is the best answer that anyone can give if they argue to the government, I'm going to cure cancer? Obviously, the government's like, oh, okay, yeah, curing cancer is of national interest, right? The next question that I'm going to ask is, how are you going to cure cancer, right? If you're just a recent grad from a PhD program in like pharmaceutical sciences, and you're saying, I might research some proteins. Again, the follow-up question is, okay, so how are you going to research the proteins? Curing cancer takes billions of dollars. So taking from that storyline for you, Taranjit, your answer to all of these questions is, I'm working in the role right now that's already impactful in X number of hospitals, right? That means that I'm already well positioned to do it because I'm already doing it. What is the best proof to show that I'm well positioned? I'm doing it right now, right? Now, again, though, I'm still a little concerned about like the picture that's being painted, right? Because when you were explaining your endeavor to me, or like what it is that you do, a lot of it, like to me, hit the whole, I'm saving revenue, right? I am sharing financial incentives with the doctors, right? How does that help America? You can help the doctors, you can help the hospital, right? So I want to understand more, right? Especially with the quality part that you highlighted, right?
I wish I really had like more time, and maybe I'll thank you for the links, Andrea. I'll probably book a consultation so that I can get more time. Please know I'm trying to talk really fast so I can respect it. I think it comes from multiple like our physicians are overburdened, they are making more mistakes. So not having them do these mistakes is also saving lives. And also now we have these new fresh graduates who are just coming into our practice within 2 years of their graduation. So we are doing a preceptorship, as in like the older physicians are teaching the new physicians, and I become like their middle ground, because I'm somebody who did understand medicine, but also has administration knowledge. So it's like a bridge. So that's what I was saying. It's a little unique. I wish I had more time to explain myself, but yeah.
But I think one thing you can take away until like a consultation or whatever it is, right, is that I hope that you can walk away understanding that there is a need to condense this into one understandable endeavor. And I think another tip, just based on what you said, think about who gets to benefit from this. Like, divorce yourself from like the physicians themselves and think about like the general public, right? You mentioned like some really cool key terms, right? If physicians are overburdened, that means there's more mistakes, right?
Yes.
There's bad healthcare, bad outcomes, and the like.
Yeah.
But how bad are the outcomes in the U.S.? Like, how bad is malpractice in the U.S.? Is that enough? Right? How many regions are you touching? How many hospitals are you working with? Right?
Mhm.
I think you need to really think about the impact right now, because I understand that in some part of what it is that you do, it's important, right? Because it's healthcare, and healthcare is like a great, strong, powerful tool here, right?
Mhm.
But I need to be able to argue, like, nationally speaking, this is a benefit that's going to be.
Thank you. That clarifies. I will come prepared with these numbers when we sit down, and also for Unshackled in 2 weeks.
Sure.
Oh, yes. Well, you've given me the perfect segue to just briefly mention about the conference, the summit that we're hosting in 9 days. I know we've been talking about this a lot. I mean, so many creators have talked about this out there that you must have seen on some social media platform that we're hosting a summit. If you haven't, take a look at that. We're happy. We're doing this in 9 days. We're expecting like 800 people to show up. It is going to be truly the largest tech immigrant summit in America ever done in the history of, like, I guess, America. So if you're in tech, if you're in STEM, if you're a researcher, if you're in healthcare, I definitely think, we've reduced the ticket prices as well to make it super affordable. Take a look. Nicole will be doing one of the keynotes at the summit. And so I'm really excited. This is going to be more than a conference. We're making it like a celebration, a festival almost. There's dance, there is stand-up comedy, there is podcast lounges. You'll meet influencers and founders and investors. Yeah, it's just like we're curating every minute of your experience to make it fun. So I hope you all can make it. But if not, no problem.
I'm super excited. I'm letting you guys know that, I think, Sundari, you tell me if this is accurate or not, at our booth. And I think there's like a lounge where we get to talk to people who have problems with their cases, who are interested in it, right? And I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there the whole day. I'm going to be there to walk about, talk to anybody who wants to talk to me. Because if I could at least tell a little bit about myself, right, as an attorney, and I hope you guys can feel it, right? I really tried my best to focus on your story, right? I think the best attorneys sit down and try to understand what it is that you do, right? Like, because if I don't understand it, how can I sell it to somebody else, right? One of the best RFE responses I ever wrote, I had to learn everything about cloud architecture. Who knew? AWS, Java, like there are all these different types of things, .NET, like wow, I never knew all that. But to craft that answer to explain why cloud architecture is so important to the future required me to sit down with a client and have multiple strategy meetings and tell them, send me materials, right? Send me information about your field, right? There's no advocate in the world who can truly talk about your story and sell it to someone else if they don't know what it is that you do. I have told every single person here, I'm not a subject matter expert in your field, but I should want to strive and I should want to drive myself to know what it is that you do, right? So that's what I think makes a great advocate. It doesn't have to be me. Some other advocates are better in your field. It's very true, right? But I really do try my best. And I think the team here at Manifest really does try their best.
Yeah, I mean, I've interacted with like 100 lawyers in my life. I think, Nicole, um, I think you're very unique in a sense of you take the time to really understand the person before responding. Because I've done a lot of these webinars with other lawyers. They try to quickly like respond and move on to the next question. Actually, I was more impatient. I was like, let's get to all the questions, please. But I'm happy you didn't do that. You took the time and responded to people and asked them follow-ups. I think it makes people feel heard, and as any lawyer should. So yeah, I can't wait for you to come do a keynote there. And also, as Nicole said, we're having a legal lounge where we're having almost 20 lawyers from some 10 different law firms: Deal, Boundless, Manifest, Fakuri, Passright, Lighthouse. They'll all be there all day, just there for you guys to talk to and answer questions. So, Taranjit and anyone else who's coming to the summit, don't just go to one lawyer. See if you can go to like 5 lawyers and talk to all of them.
Sandra, we also wanted something in the East Coast.
Oh, just organizing this is so exhausting. I need a break of a month after the webinar, the summit. I don't know if we're going to do East Coast this year, but hey, you never know. But yeah, I mean, whoever asked that question, if you can fly in, we're happy to give a discount on the ticket price since you're spending money on your travel. I do think you should try to come for this one because it's been 6 months of planning this. So
It's going to be amazing.
thank you all.
Yep.
Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Nicole, for staying behind for like 16 minutes. You're in New York. It's 10 o'clock for you, and so what are you doing? Go sleep.
Listen, I do love talking to people. I love meeting people. Like I think that's what makes me me, right? I really believe that knowledge is power. So when I get to know people and I get to know what they do, I feel very empowered by it. I feel like I get to do whatever I can.
I love that. I will paste the link for booking a free consult with Manifest one last time. If you guys haven't, click on the link. It's just like a 30-second process. I went through it. Just put your name, number, what you're looking for, and fill in the form. That's it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you all. Bye, Taranjit. Bye, everyone.